Hi, I'm Isaac. I am the main tech support guy here at Studio 128 and Willcox Theater Theater. I'm going to be showing you a quick tutorial on how to build your own PC. I'm also hosting a live class on Wednesday, May 22nd, which will basically go through the whole experience from start to finish of putting together your own PC. Every computer needs at least 7 basic components. You have your motherboard, you have your processor / graphics card, this one is an APU, you have your storage device, your RAM, you got your power supply, and your case. This first step isn't really necessary. I like to do it just in case I have a dead part laying around somewhere. It's basically just testing all the pieces outside of the case before you put it in the case. That way you don't need to go through the whole disassembly process. Notice I'm not touching any of the traces on the board, just mainly touching the edges and this little brace that's here. First, what I'm going to do, take out my little processor, a Ryzen 5 2400G. Going to find the triangle that is in the corner of both the PCB on both sides and align it with the same triangle that's on the motherboard socket. First I have to unlatch it. Right? You never want to apply any force whenever you're inserting a processor. It just sort of plops right in, especially with the PGA socket like this. LGA, it'll just fit right in. They're usually keyed so you don't put it in the wrong orientation. So I'm putting the latch down, locking it in place. Our processor is now in place. I think what I'm going to do next is go in with the RAM, because it's just simple. Hopefully I don't fling it everywhere. Come out. There we go. Try your best not to touch any of the gold contacts. Your oils on your skin can block the flow of electricity going through it, signal and everything like that. Just stick with the heatsink and the edges of these components and stuff. So, opening both of the DIMM slots, and notice on the RAM stick there is a small little notch that'll prevent you from putting it in the wrong way. I only have 2 slots. I don't really care which one I do first since they're both going to be occupied. Refer to your motherboard manual to see which slot you need to occupy first if you only have 1 DIMM, or if you have 4 DIMMs, which 2 you need to do for the first channel. And with a satisfying click, they're in. I chose to go with a SATA M.2 SSD because it's relatively cheap. It's not NVMe speeds or anything, but it's a lot more convenient. You don't need to worry about any SATA cables or SATA power cables from your power supply. My motherboard, sit that down, came with a little screw that goes onto the M.2 slot. And if you lose this, you're sort of screwed. Right about here's my M.2 slot, and it looks like the screw threading place thing is right here on the right. Is that the right size? Let's test it. This is sort of spring activated. Whenever you insert it, it's not going to go down. It's sort of like that. You're going to have to push it down as you're screwing it in, and it looks like that's the right size. It's in the right hole. So I'm just going to put that in. Only wrist tight, and that looks good. So notice on this motherboard there's these little brackets right here that are meant for different coolers, but it won't work with mine because this is just a Wraith Stealth cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 2400G. So what I'm going to have to do is unscrew these brackets as best as I can. No, I didn't use this one. I used another one. This was way longer than it needed to. Leave those aside for now. So on this motherboard specifically, I noticed that whenever I oriented the cooler this way, the little AMD logo on the right spire, since it's so short, it sort of interferes with the RAM slot, and if you tighten it all the way, it will actually shove that DIMM into its socket. I didn't fix that on the first time that I built this. I plan to later on, but so far it hasn't really caused any issues. But for this one, I'm going to orient it the other way with the logo away from the DIMM slots. So just got to line the screws on the brace that's in the back. And this is what I use this screwdriver for, so I can push it down. I'm more used to Intel box coolers. They're just so easy to clip in, but they also suck when it comes to thermal performance. They're nice if you're not overclocking, but that's basically all they're good for. Hopefully I'm actually threading these into where they're supposed to go. Oh yeah, that one felt like it. Are you in? I'm not going to screw one all the way down. I'm just going to go in like a cross pattern so that the thermal paste that's pre-applied on the bottom of this cooler will have more even spread. That noise you're hearing, it's just from the spring. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just metal on metal. That's good. And I'm going to plug this into the CPU fan header. Actually, no, I'm going to wrap that around, get it out of the way. I think now I'm good to test this. Since I'm not using a regular 2.5 or 3.5 inch drive, I don't need a SATA power connector. I'm just going to get the 24 pin on the motherboard. It's not really going to clip in because it's such a beefy connector. And I need the 8 pin on this specific motherboard for CPU. That clipped. So I have this monitor here just to make sure that we'll actually post whenever I turn this on. I guess I'll rotate this around. I'm not even going to bother screwing it in. Okay. On your motherboard, there is a group of, let's see, 9 pins that should say something like front panel. On this Gigabyte board it says JFP1. A couple of those are your power switch that you need to short out in order to turn on your PC. That's what the power switch does, it's just shorting a circuit. And if I remember correctly, let's turn this on. Those two are right here. I'm using a flathead screwdriver just to touch these two pins together. All right. Got fans spinning, we got lights blinking. Now let's see if we actually get a post screen. I don't have a keyboard and mouse, but what I do have is a pocket keyboard and mouse. 20 bucks. These are really useful. Let's get this into one of the ports without touching anything on the motherboard except for stuff. Just don't touch the motherboard with your bare hands. Stick to the edges, stick to this, maybe the RAM, maybe the cooler, just don't touch any surface of it. F1. So we got the CPU being detected, good thermals, it's not overheating because nothing's really happening right now. How much RAM? I ordered 8 gigs, it detects 8 gigs, that's good. Storage, we have the 500 gigabyte SSD, it's detected. Looks like everything's good. All the parts are working, amazing. Let's turn it off from the BIOS. Alright, everything's tested, it's working. It's time to move this stuff over to the case. IO shield, might as well take care of this now. So there's this hole in the back of your case. This is where your IO on the back of your motherboard's going to go. This is the shield for it. IO shield does a couple of things to my knowledge. 1, prevents dust from getting into the case. 2, if you have stuff like Wi-Fi, oh that's backwards. stuff like Wi-Fi, stuff like Bluetooth coming off the back of the case right here. It helps with reducing interference, for sure. You just have to brush it, apply pressure on all the sides, make sure everything's clipped in. But don't push it all the way through, else you might bend something. That one looks good. All right, so I got the IO shield in. I got, off camera, I took off 6 of the right screws that I needed. Your case will let you know which screws you need to put in different parts, like your GPU, your power supply, your fans, hard drive, stuff like that. This one has a certain type of screw that's specifically labeled for the motherboard. I'm gonna put it in, roughly align it with the holes around your IO shield. Yeah, that's good. Make sure that they're all lining up with those standoffs. In this case, the Roswell FBM X2 had my standoffs already put in, and they're the right ones for this size of motherboard. I think there's like 2 different standards of micro ATX, and it's kind of weird. One of them's thicker, has more DIMM slots. Maybe I should have got one of those. One screw. I like to, even though it's not really necessary, I like to screw these in a cross pattern so that in case you end up having a little bit of wiggle room that makes it offset off to one side, it's better to even it out now so that you don't have to loosen them and push it later on to get the screws on the other side in. So a funny thing, I always recommend getting a magnetic set of screwdrivers or screwdriver bits. These ones from the Amazon Basics kit were not magnetic whenever I got them. What I had to do, I'll actually demonstrate. So I have this hard drive magnet. You can use really any magnet you want to. And you sort of swipe it in one direction. Do that like about 10 times, 12 times, something like that. The stronger the magnet, the better. And it should make it a lot more magnetic. See, now I can shake it and it doesn't fall that much. Motherboard's in. I think what I'll do now is route this fan cable around the fan. This is what I did with the previous 2, and it stayed pretty well. And then just stick it onto the fan header that is conveniently right there. This is a 3-pin. It's without PWM, without pulse width modulation, but that's fine. A 3-pin will fit on a 4-pin header, no problem. All right. So there's this huge hole right here for the power supply. On this specific case, it's bottom mounted, and it also has ventilation on the bottom that tells us that our fan needs to be positioned downward towards the bottom of the case. Hey Wesley, want to help me with this part? Yeah. Make it faster. I'm just going to feed these cables through and just going to pull them on that side. If you're doing this alone, you can, but friends are good. Isn't that right, Wesley?
Exactly.
I think that's the last one. Just pull them off. One of these SATA ones, there we go. Alright, and in this case, and this motherboard, the power supply goes right up against the edge of it, and it just fits underneath, which is fine. It's just sort of unnerving. Whenever you're inserting this, try to keep it as low as possible so that you don't accidentally like rub right up against the headers. Because those pins can bend. You can bend them back, but sometimes they have the chance to break. Okay, now I gotta screw it in. All wrist tight. And look at that. we're almost done. I think the only thing we have left is cable management, which is probably the longest part of any build, depending on if you decide to do a good job. So I did do this 2 other times before, like I mentioned, so I have a general idea of what I did with these cables. If you notice, back here we have very little room for cable management. This is nice for a budget case. It's definitely not ideal because I would like some more space. And I did not get a modular power supply or a semi-modular one, so I'm gonna have a bunch of these cables sticking out, and I don't want them in the main chamber because it looks grody. So what I did, even though it's definitely not advised by anyone, I took out the 3.5-inch drive bay because I wasn't using it and I don't plan to later. I could always get a 2.5-inch drive. All the cables that I'm not using, I shoved in there so that it's out of the way and out of sight. I know that this case doesn't have a window. I just like a neat cable management in any build that I do. But I decided to get this case because it's really nice for budget builds. It offers a lot of modern features like bottom mounted power supply, some cable management space right here, and yeah, that's basically it. Oh, you also have support for radiators, like you can fit up to a 280 in the front, maybe another 280 in the top. No, maybe that's just 240. And it comes with a 120 mil fan in the back, which with older cases it's usually an 80 millimeter, which is sort of crap for airflow. I like this case. I recommend it. It's really nice. Okay, well, how did I route this before? My front panel I/O going in there. Where's my USB 3? USB 3. I don't know if they're all marked blue like this, but all the ones that I have seen from cases were marked blue. And the only reason why I did that was so that I could pull it tight and not have it stick out too much, because this is really not that much space between the side panel and the internal thing that holds the motherboard. So I have it sticking out now. So as I press this down, I'm actually getting some flex on the motherboard itself. That's fine. The PCBs on these can handle quite a bit of force. If you feel uncomfortable, you can use less force, but they can handle quite a bit. Just don't like hammer it down or something. Looks like it's as good as it's gonna get. So these are actually keyed because front panel audio and USB have a really similar looking connector, but there is a spot where the hole is filled in, and that prevents you from sticking it into the wrong header on your motherboard. USB has one on the corner, audio has one that's just off to the side of that. So I got my PC put together, I got the monitor hooked up again, I have power going everywhere, cable for the display is in. I actually have a Windows 10 USB key into the USB 3 port right there, so I can start the process of installing Windows just to make sure that it goes smoothly. And I think all that we need to do is make sure it turns on. We got lights, here fans. That's actually a really quiet cooler. Got airflow in the back. You guys see anything yet? Ooh, I got the little Windows 10 spinny thing. Well, I guess we're good to go. Everything's working. Cable management's done. PC's put together. I just need to install Windows now so that it's actually useful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the Studio 128 PC building guide. Links for everything that we used will be in the description below. Feel free to subscribe or like if you want to, dislike if you think it was bad. The whole shebang. Thank you.